All right, guys. So we have definitely focused on some hard conversations. And the hardest conversation, I think, maybe even right now, is crossing over boundaries. We just finished and wrapped up in the early spring of June 2023, a whole series on boundaries and what that looks like. And, there's can always be, however you want to define it, maybe a small boundary or a big boundary. I don't know how we can qualify that. But one of my hearts is always, no matter what, physical, sexual, mental, whatever that boundary looks like, to always resource back to Jesus, but also a professional and a really tangible tool to kind of walk us through these hard spaces. And that is why Erica is here today. And I have just loved getting to know her and talking with her. Her heart for Jesus is strong and palpable. And that is why she is here first and foremost. So, Erica, I'm going to just let you introduce yourself, who you work for, what your specialty is, and we'll go from there.
That sounds great. Well, thank you, Amber, and Brave FCA just for having me today. I am Erica Faulhaber. I'm a licensed professional counselor. I'm a national board certified counselor. I'm certified in EMDR. I'm an EMDR consultant in training, so lots of alphabet soup, if you will.
What's
I'm
EMDR? If somebody doesn't know,
yeah, sure. That's a great question. It is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. So it's a type of therapy. It's traditionally used with trauma in particular, but it's helpful for lots of various things. I am the owner and primary therapist of New Directions, Colorado. And it's a private practice in Erie, Colorado. So my specialties or my niche area include eating disorders and trauma, specifically sexual abuse and sexual assaults. And my education, experience, and trainings have really developed and grown in a variety of settings from both inpatient to outpatient settings. I have worked in an eating disorder treatment facility. I've worked in school settings, community counseling center, a group practice, my private practice. I've got a lot of well-rounded experience. My undergraduate is in psychology from CU Boulder, and my master's is in clinical mental health counseling from Colorado Christian University. And I'm currently pursuing my PhD in counselor education and supervision. So things are busy. I'm entering my third year in the fall of that. And it is just delightful to continue in this realm of practice. I love what I do. We'll get more, I'm sure, into that, but that's just a little bit about who I am and what I do.
Yeah. Busy. You're definitely busy, but
Busy.
well-rounded. So you're out in Colorado, beautiful space. Tell us a little bit about what you love about Colorado. I love to talk about food. So like, where's your
Perfect.
favorite place to eat and why? Because Colorado is very different from New York. So I would just like, why do you love
Yes.
Colorado? What is it about that has you living there? And give me some food.
Yeah. So I'm a native, and not very many people get to say that. I meet a lot of transplants. I get why people are coming to Colorado. It is so darn beautiful. The mountains, we've got all four seasons. It's lovely. So what I love about Colorado is just being able to be outside, being able to garden, being able to, again, go hiking, or if I want to go fishing, I can, or if I want to walk my dog, I can. If I want to go snowboarding, I can. It's wonderful for that. When it comes to food, I could talk about food all day long too. Working with eating disorders, also, I love
Right?
talking about food. Yes. So for me, Erie is very unique, Amber. It is growing. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. Most people, when I say I'm from Erie, they think I'm from Erie, Pennsylvania. Nope,
Yep.
Erie, Colorado. It's growing. It's tiny though. I would say commercial hasn't caught up to residential. So when it comes to food, there's probably a handful of places I like to go. There's this great Mexican place if you like Mexican. It's called Wapos with a W, Wapos, and they have amazing carnita tacos and their queso to die for. To
Yeah, you're
die for.
speaking my love language.
Oh,
We're
good. Yeah. And what's your favorite out there?
Oh, so we're from a small town too. So it's usually
Okay.
your mom and pop like places. So we have some Mexican places. We have an amazing Chinese place, like
Ooh.
within walking distance of my house. To this day, I can't find someone who is better than them. So it's a challenge I'm willing to accept. So yeah, it's in our diners. Like
Nice.
we're big, like kind of not early like brunch people. So
Yeah.
meetings, I'm always scheduling around breakfast.
Oh,
This is
there's really good brunch places too up here. I forgot about those.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So brunch is my favorite because it's like it's not early enough for breakfast. It's not quite lunch, but you can kind of get the best of both worlds.
I love it. Yes. Can't
Yep. So
go
that's
wrong
how
with
I
that.
plan my days, in case anybody's wondering. It's like we do brunch. Okay.
And then I can do this other
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. Woman after my own heart.
There we go. See, we're working on it. Queso, especially, I'm in.
Oh,
So,
okay, so guac. So
yep.
good.
Yep. So I love it. It's so good. So
It
here's
is.
the thing. We're just gonna segue right into, from having some fun and kind of in a line of work that maybe I wouldn't say is fun necessarily, but I think you probably see the best and worst of all of it, right? Like
Yeah.
the hard stuff makes the good stuff maybe shine a little bit brighter for you. I
Mm.
would like to think that I'm not liking to think, I would think that in your line of work, it gets really hard a lot. Can you walk us through, like, why you felt called to this, why you're staying in it? You must hear a lot of hard things. And how do you get up every day, confirm that God is still good? And
Mm.
what does that look like for you in your heart and in your professional life, kind of combined, really?
I don't think you can separate the two. So I love that you're pairing them together. It is hard work from an emotional standpoint. I hear a lot of different stories that um, are devastating. They are traumatic. And then I do also see those moments of recovery or resilience that I'm like, dang, God knew exactly what he was doing by helping you walk through this healing journey. I really felt called to be with the wounded. And so what I was doing beforehand was not I would say not really with people, it was for people. And now I get to be with people. And so what gets me up every day is knowing one, how my personal story impacts what I do, but two, again, just watching my clients heal from some of these things that have happened at the hands of other people. Um, that it wasn't God doing it, it was humans doing it. And so for me, that's how I stay connected still to my faith, knowing that it was not God that perpetrated on people, it was other humans that did. And so being able to sit with them in that space and say, I get it. You might be shaking your fist at God right now. Let's talk about what that's like. How does faith inform your recovery? How can you allow God into that space? When you weep, He's also weeping. And so for me, it's really important to allow also that space for them to come in for, anger or disappointment or sadness in that space. I think sometimes people want to just push it away and say, God can heal everything. And absolutely, God can. And is there space, because God can hold it, to say, I'm hurting right now and I just need you to be with me. So for me, that's really how I stay connected to faith. That's how I do what I do every day. I wouldn't do something different. That's why I'm continuing to climb this ladder of developing new clinicians too, because I want them to be in the space where they can help heal this hurting world that we live in. We're not seeing relief per se. We are seeing more and more cases of mental health struggles coming forward. And do I believe that that is because of how um, maybe the second coming is happening soon, hopefully, right? We want to be in that space where hurting is no more and tears are wiped away. But for the time being, if God is able to use me and sit with them, then that's what I want to be doing.
Yes. And that's amazing. I think that is a calling. I don't think you can sit in those spaces for too long without breaking down a little bit. And so when you don't have, and I think you kind of touched on it a little bit, and we have touched on it a little bit before, is kind of the why would God allow, if God is so good, if God loves me, why? And
Mhm.
that's a hard, I'm sure you get asked that.
All the time.
What do,
All
what
the
do
time.
you, what do you say to that?
Yeah, well, it goes back to the fall, right? I'm able to point them back to the fall and say, this is because of the fall, all these different things have happened. And if God is so good, as you're saying, um, He brought you here to heal. And so being able to step into that space to say, God is still good. And what are ways that you're able to see God showing up?
Mhm.
Because again, it wasn't God that did this, it was a human. that there is evil in this world. And so we're able to have that conversation too.
Yeah. That's a hard one. That's a hard one. I also,
It is.
are you, do you give them permission to kind of sit in their pain for a while? Like,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, I mean, what, because I think sometimes the misconception is, especially for Christians, maybe, right, is that my faith alone should heal me. I should be okay. I should be able to turn to God, or there's anger at God.
Mhm.
I think almost sometimes the faith thing makes it really complicated, to be honest, right? And so
Sure.
it's almost like they give themselves too short of a timetable. There's almost too much. Like I should, okay, I this happened. I want to be better by next month. So,
Totally.
and I obviously in your head you're like, okay, everybody's timetable is different. What is that? When someone comes to you and they've been hurt, especially,
Mhm.
sexually, that is a space that is so tender and hard and intimate, right? And it's been crossed in an evil way. What is that
Mhm.
like? Like, what is a journey? Not that everybody looks the same, but maybe what does a journey look like for someone when they sit down in front of you? It's their first time. They've
Mhm.
confessed, they've shown you what's happened to them. What's that first time like?
I think the first time is really noticing what's coming up, those strong emotions. And like you said, allowing them to have strong emotions. I think another thing that comes up in our first few sessions together is naming it. It sometimes hasn't even been named. And so for those clients, that is a very vulnerable space. That was something that's so, as you said, sacred or intimate, highly personal, right? That's their body. That's
Mm.
what we walk around in every day. And so for them in particular, in the beginning is really just identifying, okay, what did happen? Let's name it. You are not to blame. You are not to shame. This is something that you were violated with. And sometimes it's one occurrence, and sometimes it's a chronic series of events.
Yeah.
In those more chronic cases, those can be more challenging because it can be like, okay, I understand maybe the one off, but why was I constantly in this space of being abused, especially sexually? I must have done something to continue this pattern. So we do a lot of work around identity and separating them from the perpetrator and separating them from the incident. We externalize it quite a bit. What happened to you is not you. That's not your identity. Your identity is who God created you to be. And your identity is, again, going to these different resources that He's put in place, including Him, first and foremost, to say, I need your hands walking through this. I'm in pain. So, again, lots of just naming the emotion, naming what happened, moving it away from them, externalizing it, and then really getting into some tactical tools about developing boundaries, being able to point out some of these flags in other relationships that might not be healthy, and helping them reestablish trust with other people, because we know that especially with sexual abuse, trauma can just be ripped, trust can just be ripped apart and really hard to reinstate, if you will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like there's some resistance and maybe stigma to getting, maybe we don't call it therapy, coming to talk to you, like,
Mm.
I know those girls. I have talked with those girls, and it's like they come to the end of myself, right? Like I can give so much encouragement, but this type of thing, I don't know where to go with them. And so I'm always, looking for a resource like, okay, like you need to go talk to somebody. And right there, it's almost like I can feel the resistance in them. Why?
Mhm.
Like, why do you think it's hard for them? Do you think there's a stigma to it? Do you think, the word therapy even is crazy? Do you think they not need it? Like, what are some resistance that you see?
Yeah.
Some girl finally comes in and says, like, I could have done this a year ago and I didn't. What are maybe some things we could
Yeah.
strip away, some fears that coming to you or someone like you with your background and your
Yeah.
Lord, what's something that you think you see?
I think with stigma, sure, that can be there. I think it's starting to shift more and more. Since the pandemic, I would say I'm starting to see people more willing to accept help. But I think particularly with sexual abuse, it is very shame inducing. And so again, it's that piece of, if I tell you, what are you going to think about me?
Mm.
Are you going to think I'm dirty? Are you going to think I'm used? Are you going to think I'm less than? Are you going to think I brought this on myself? And so for those girls in particular, I want them to hear, again, you did not bring this on yourself. You did not invite this type of behavior towards yourself. I would tell them, give it a try. You're so brave for even naming it. It takes a lot of courage just to be in that space to recognize that something was wrong. And now there's something on your heart telling you something's wrong. What do I do with it? Follow that little instinct because you have it. And as you sit with somebody, you don't have to do a play by play. I always tell people that. I think people are afraid in therapy. I have to tell you every single detail. No, because we don't want to re-traumatize,
Yes.
right?
Mhm. Yes.
Yeah, we don't want to re-traumatize. So I'm going to take you back to science class. We're going to do titration. We're going to put a little bit and see if you can trust me. We're going to do a little bit more and see if you can trust me. And
Mhm.
so we're constantly learning how to build up that muscle again of trust because, again, if trust is ruptured outside of the therapy office, I can't expect as a therapist you're going to trust me either. That
Yeah.
makes sense,
Yeah.
right?
That's so good. And I think you're right. You said that, like, I don't have to go through it again. Like, I don't have to talk about it again.
No.
I think that's what they are afraid they're going to have to do is
Yeah.
detail by detail, be like, well, this is what happened. So you have a clue, and
Right,
like, so,
exactly.
I mean, I would have thought that honestly until you said that. I'm like, oof,
Right,
like, would I have to walk through exactly so and you can help me? Like, that's
right.
that's really good. I don't like to go into stats too much, but if you
Hmm.
were to kind of give your professional opinion, let's say there's
Hmm.
10 girls in a room, how many do
Hmm.
you think have had their boundaries crossed physically?
Okay, so with that, new numbers are always coming out. And so, when it comes to sexual abuse in particular, there's one in four women. There's 1 in 6 men, there's 1 in 5 people. But if you were to go back to your 12, it's roughly three.
Yeah,
Three. If we're looking at a soccer team, that's maybe three of your girls.
yeah. That's
Right? There's 11 on the field, but maybe there's one on the bench or two on the bench. And so it's having that awareness of the prevalency is huge. It is not something to just, breeze over. That's one too many.
yeah.
That's
Yeah.
two too many. That's three too many.
Yeah, no, and we were talking about that. I forget with who we were talking about a small group. Like even in like if you're doing a small group Bible study, chances are at least one girl, one woman in
Yeah.
there has trauma in this particular area of sexual abuse. And I'll relate back to if you guys haven't seen it. We did a really great interview with actually she was my college roommate and teammate Lacey, and defining it before we think of sexual assault as this. It is like way over here, but the scale is long with this whole
Yeah.
thing. She talked about just a time where, a guy kissed her and she didn't want it.
Mhm.
It was over within seconds, but she was like, I just was uncomfortable. I didn't want it, but I felt bad. She's like, I felt like I was gonna, she's like, and I didn't tell anybody because I didn't want to get him in trouble. So it's something like, and there it begins, right? It's like
Right.
something, and I don't want to say simple, but something like that. It wasn't necessarily a hardcore, something you would see on, Dateline, but it was
Right.
here, very beginning, very simple. And I think a lot of girls go through that and they feel weird about it, but they don't know how to
Mhm.
communicate it. Do you think that that's true?
I think that's true. And I think, depending on who you tell to, it's not how we receive what they went through, it's how that person does.
Yeah.
And so if that person is feeling violated, we need to listen to that and get the appropriate help in
Yeah.
place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you could, I mean, I know you have your own story, but if and there's so
Yeah.
much that goes into why you're doing what you're doing. But if you could share anything with an audience of girls listening about this area, especially of sexual assault or misconduct, what would you want them to know? What would you want to share?
Oh gosh. Okay. So with girls,
I mean, within like,
there's so much.
you're like,
Like
I
we have
could go
like
on for about 2 hours.
5 hours. Yeah.
I know.
2 weeks. Like we can do this. Yeah. I
Yeah.
would say trust your gut first and foremost. If you feel unsafe, um, tell someone. If it's your parents, if it's grandparents, teachers, doctors, again, a therapist. This is your body. This is not somebody else's. It doesn't belong to somebody else. I think from my own story, I would have liked to hear that it is my own body and that I have autonomy and choice over it. and that nothing good comes from secret holding. I teach a lot of my girls about the differences between secrets, surprises, and privacy. They're all very different. And
Could you go
so,
into that a little bit? Like
yeah,
that's,
sure.
yeah, do that.
Yeah. So with secrets, if somebody's telling you to hold a secret and they're telling you, I don't want you to say anything, um, that could be a red flag because secrets don't typically, they're not for something that's going to help somebody. They're usually something that's trying to withhold information or, trying to, I guess, put a blinder on, if you will. There's something that feels like it cannot be out in the open. When it comes to surprises, though, maybe we're throwing a surprise birthday party and we're like, hey, this is going to be a surprise. Don't share it. That's very different because it's for something of the good,
Yeah.
right? And then there's privacy. And with privacy, that could be something around, I don't want to talk about this because it's private and it has to do with me, but it's not a violation. It's for true privacy of something that's sacred, like your body. And so maybe it's, having to do with, um, I don't feel comfortable talking about using the restroom, for example, or I don't feel comfortable talking about different things that are happening to my body, right? Especially during puberty, right? That could be something where, it's not, it's private. It's not for other people to know or to share in, right? But again, surprises, people get to share in those. And then again, secrets, nobody gets to share in those because they're trying to put you in a space where they don't want it to be out in the open. So in my practice, I always tell them whatever happens in the dark, though, does come to light at one point. I want to help you shine the light on whatever that might be that is happening in the darkness. It might not happen, as soon as we want it to.
Yep.
And I can speak from experience in that. I would have wished and hoped that somebody could have seen what was happening to me earlier than I was able to disclose it. But I also want to tell the girls that are afraid to disclose it, I get it. I understand. It is terrifying to tell somebody this is what's happening to me because you don't know how it's going to be received or perceived. And so I just would let those girls know that there are supports for you. Recovery is possible. Um, and you don't have to go through this alone. And for coaches, I would tell them, you can be literally the person that helps empower the athlete. You can be the person that allows your girls to find their voice and choice again. I use voice and choice a lot in my practice. And with that, what I mean is allow their voice to be heard if they feel uncomfortable or if they feel like they're not in a safe space. Allow that voice to come to you and allow them to help discover some of the choices they have. They can report, they can tell somebody, they can seek therapy, they can have you there with them if they need to, if they really trust you and value that relationship. I would say also with coaches in particular, lead by example. Be the trust, be the care inappropriately. Be that servant heart where again you're able to connect with them. Form those healthy and positive relationships. You want them to have sport be a positive experience. You don't want them to experience this in sport either, because that's a lot of shame inducing things too of I must have had this happen because of being a great athlete.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Not necessarily, right?
Yeah, you touched on, I mean, I love going back. I love the differentiating of secrecy and privacy. That was a really, I mean, because I think they get confused. It's private. No,
Yeah,
that's actually a secret. Like I love,
right.
that's really great. And then just even on the coaches side, and I'm on both sides, a healthy coach does wonderful things and a unhealthy coach can be very, very bad. Like for lack
Right.
so, there's very hard. We've seen both sides. We've seen it go very well. A healthy coach doing really wonderful things to empower girls to come forward, and then the coach being
Mhm.
the very reason that they're hurt. So,
Right.
that's Yeah, I love it. And like, and a healthy coach we've always encouraged, even when I work with coaches, if you think something's wrong, pay attention, and just watch and always. And
Exactly.
when I did coach, it was a broad sweeping, like, hey, if there's anything ever hurting you guys, like, just come to me. I would love to know. And when texting anything, that was actually a great tool for them because they didn't have to go face to face with it first. They could text it to me. And
Right.
yeah, such good advice to begin with. So I love that you love Jesus.
I
And
do love Jesus.
you do love Jesus. And I love that the profession that you in combines both. I feel
Mhm.
like sometimes there's a separation,
Mhm.
that, love Jesus, pray really hard, get into your Bible, so key, validated, but we sometimes need some really concrete core tools, like what you have. And so could you go into
Mhm.
just some things that if I was to say, hey, I know Erica from New Directions, Colorado, this is what she can help you with. What are the tools that you have to offer?
Yeah, so I think I am a Christian who also happens to be a therapist. My clients know that. I see clients that are not of the faith as well too, but I would tell my clients that they are more than welcome to bring in their faith as a resource first and foremost. If they want to integrate that into their treatment, I welcome it wholeheartedly. Um, I think it's hard not to do treatment without Jesus. But some people are just so angry in the beginning that they're like, I want nothing to do with my faith right now. And okay. And then usually it comes back up at some point, which is lovely to see. But I would say the biggest things that I can offer people, apart from just processing the actual trauma, would be tools to get back into their body. Because so often, much like with eating disorders, with sexual abuse, they want to stay up here. They want to stay in cognitions because it's so painful to experience their bodies again. It is really painful to feel emotions again, because if I feel emotions, I'm going to feel some of these yucky or bad ones. And so I really help girls reintegrate the two. And so I always tell people, it's like we're severed right here. And I'm trying to bring everybody back together, head and body, because this is our whole being. And in that, bringing your heart back into it too. So with resources, we work on grounding, again, getting back into their body if they're starting to feel overwhelmed. I would say some of the other resources is, again, boundaries, using assertive communication. That's a big one. I think it's hard to stand up to a coach when they are the authority figure, right? And so it's learning how to advocate for themselves and their needs. I think another tool would be looking at some of these cognitive distortions that they might have. And, in layman's terms, for not psychobabble stuff,
Yeah.
um, right? It's mixed up thoughts. And so some of those thoughts might be, one of them could be black and white thinking. And so helping them get back out of, the world is not all bad.
Yeah.
There are people in the world that are bad, but not the whole world. Another distortion or mixed up thought might be, um, because I had this happen on this team, it's going to happen on any team that I'm a part of. And that's another like generalization type thing. And we're trying to break that up. And then emotional regulation is another huge one, and distress tolerance, to say, hey, how can we regulate some of these strong emotions that are coming up? How do we kind of, if you will, ride the wave? And that way you can notice it's a strong emotion. I get to have it, but I know what to do with it.
Yeah.
With distress tolerance, how can I tolerate some of the distress that's happening in my body again, and not feeling like I need to go numb out or zone out, if you will? How can I just be right in the moment and say, okay, this is temporary, I'm going to get through it? And then we resource again around that. So those are just a few quick
Yeah.
things.
Those are so great. So I have one last thing, and I think I'm excited to end here. What are some conversations we should be having? And I asked that in the context of I'm on a team. I know something's not right with my teammate. And I can almost probably guess what it might be. That conversation, or I'm coaching. I know my players, and I know not something's not right, or I'm a parent. Something's not right. And we all have that, right? We can all, and sometimes it's like I don't want to uh I don't want to, maybe overreact. I don't want to say something that's going to be hurtful. What are some conversations that we can be having when maybe we kind of have a feeling something's not right with somebody?
I think trusting your gut is huge. I think the conversations we're not having have to do with prevention efforts. We're talking so much about after the facts and what to do,
Yep.
and this can be prevented.
Mm.
And so, even if it feels like, am I overreacting? Um, I would err on the side of better to be safe than sorry. And if this is a way to interrupt that cycle with whoever is perpetrating on somebody, let's do it. Let's have that. If people need to reach out to me to say, I don't know a hotline to call, um, perfect. I've got a zillion hotlines I can provide you guys with.
Yes, yes,
And I'll leave those with you too, Amber.
yes.
But I think first and foremost, just knowing that those resources are available, but those parents, the coaches, trainers, um, you know, letting them know that you can sense things that children cannot typically. Children have a very good instinct, so I'm going to name that too. But for those adults, follow it. If you don't want to be the bad guy, you can do it anonymously. There's anonymous tip lines. There's lots of ways to stop the cycle, but again, the conversation needs to be about prevention.
What are
We
some
can't
things?
keep having,
Let's talk
yeah.
about prevention. Like, well, I'm there actually, so I lied.
Just kidding.
If you're like, hey, let's talk
Mm,
about prevention. What are some
yeah.
prevention topics? Like, what are some things that you would say, hey, we need to be doing this first?
We need to be talking about what appropriate space is with our athletes, right? And so, we always talk about like the triangle, which goes shoulder to shoulder down to more private areas, right? And so this is something that with younger athletes, that's something that they might not fully understand. If you're doing like U5 or U7, right? But if you're doing even some of the older ones, they might not have had clear boundaries in their households. People might be walking in as they're getting ready or changed, or, and for some houses, that's okay because boundaries haven't been crossed. But for others, they've really not had that personal space. And so being able to have conversations about appropriate boundaries with bodies, being able to mitigate, these questionable behaviors. Are there zero tolerance policies in place? Or is it inaction that's happening? Is there a code of conduct that's being, upheld in these organizations? Is it letting them know that they are safe to tell? I think so many times, especially in leadership, that message is not coming down, and it needs to come from the top down. It needs to be coming from the board of directors all the way down to coaching staff, to athletes, to the parents. Because again, some of these things with prevention, it's not about one time could, not have as many ramifications. It could be one time has many ramifications for a lifetime. It could be the chronic, that again has lots of ramifications. And so prevention has to do with top down. We need to start having these conversations again about what's appropriate, what's not, and holding people to those standards
Yeah.
because they're in positions of power for a reason.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
I think now coaching is a little bit, it is more difficult in the way that our culture has so much coming at it. And I stopped coaching a few years ago, but I even look at it now, like I think coaches, I think if you're bold enough to step into that space, because chances are many times the parents haven't had that conversation. And so
exactly.
it's almost like it doesn't have to be this big thing, but almost being like, hey, just from my heart to yours, for me, I was coaching girls. So from girl to girl, like, if there's ever an issue, and this is how I feel a guy should be treating you, this is how I feel your bodies are precious. Some
Mm,
people have never heard them say your
no.
body is precious, and they're like, wait, what? So,
Hmm.
but even if you're not a believer, but you just
Right.
hard for these girls to not be misused. That's a conversation you can have at the end of practice. Like, it can be
Right.
done, and it is hard, right? But like,
Right.
you could be the only one in their space saying, look, at your body actually means something special. And that's the
Right.
first time I've heard. And I coach varsity, so by the time they get to me, they're 14, 15 years old. So
Right.
yeah. Anyway, this could go on forever.
Yes.
I think we have so many things to go
No, this is
through.
good.
I'm going to post all of the numbers from you, your website,
Yeah.
on fcbrave.org. We do have a resource page. And this will be part of the Boundaries series as well, but it'll be very easy to find. It's New Directions Colorado, and we're gonna make sure you guys can connect specifically to you, but to your organization as well on all things needed. So I just thank you for sharing with us for a little bit. I know there's so many things we could go into, and we could probably do this for a couple hours and uncover so much. But any final thoughts before we sign off here? I thank you so much for coming on.
Well, I just would say you are brave for noticing just exactly who you are first and foremost. And through these experiences, you're not any less than. And so I want you to hear that loud and clear, that you are valuable, you are precious, as Amber just said. And we want recovery for you. We also don't want it to happen. And so we're working on prevention. But if it does happen, there are resources. You can heal from it, and life will move on. So I am so appreciative that you had me today. I care deeply for this population.
Same. Thank you, Erica.
You're welcome.